Hey folks, how's everybody doing? This is Mike, Gray1951, and I wanted to take part in the weekly chat with James and everybody else who's participating. And so this is happy Thanksgiving night. I'm sitting here relaxing with Dad's root beer out of the bottle. So, all right. So the topic is, how do we organize our DVD collections? Do we mix in Blu-rays with DVDs, etc., etc.? And well, as I've said many times, I don't yet collect Blu-rays. I only have one, still have one. So that part of the question is not yet a problem for me. I'm sure it will be later on. I don't know what I would do if I wanted to mix them together. Maybe I wouldn't do it. But anyway, I categorize a lot of my DVD collection according to director, some by actor, and some by genre. But beyond that, I have let's see, a huge section where basically two entire shelving systems right now of miscellaneous films that are categorized alphabetically. And that includes things all the way from the silent era, like The Birth of a Nation, all the way up to things that were made last year, okay? And in that section, I include a lot of the things that I've been buying in the last year or so from Big Lots for $3 and $5. Things that I've been buying from Barnes & Noble, newer films that I don't want to put in a section according to the actors who were in them or according to the directors. Okay, so have I don't know how many I have, but that's quite a large part of the collection. I also, as James said, I put my Criterion collection all in one place on one long shelf, and I didn't always do that. I used to have those mixed in. For example, the horror films, Vampire, Eyes Without a Face, and The Blob. I had those in with the horror films, and some of the things according to different actors I had in their particular sections. Okay, I also have my horror films and science fiction films. I put those all in the same shelving systems. I categorize those not alphabetically, but by decade. So I begin with the silent era, and I only have 3 silent films that would be considered horror and science fiction. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Nosferatu, and Metropolis. So those are on the top shelf on the beginning side, the left side. Then I move into the decade of the 1930s, which of course would include the early Universal films, things from other studios like Mark of the Vampire with Bela Lugosi, some of the other things that were done outside of Universal like The Ghoul with Boris Karloff, all from the 1930s. And it continues on to the end of that decade, then it goes into the 1940s. And in all these sections I include the low budget films from studios like Monogram that were horror films and science fiction at the time. Then I get up into the decade of the 1950s where the golden era of the science fiction movies that I love so much, that's where they all began. So that section is more science fiction than horror. But I have them all categorized according to decade, and usually by the year that they were made. That's how I try to do it. So that goes up all through the 60s, the 70s, and to the present day. That's where I try to put all my horror and science fiction movies, okay? The ones that I categorize according to actor, director, and actress, there aren't that many, but my favorite actresses such as Barbara Steele, she has her own section. And of course, a lot of the things she did were horror films, but I don't put those with the horror films. She has her own shelf, right? And I actually went through a big moral crisis, what constitutes a moral crisis in my existence, of whether or not to take 2 of her classic films, non-horror films, Fellini's 8½, and Volker Schlondorff's Young Torless, which was made in 1967, to take those from her section, because I think of those as being her films, and putting those into the Criterion shelf. So I finally decided that all the Criterion should be together, so I took those off of her shelf. Was not an easy thing to do. That shows you how anal retentive I get about this stuff. Also, going back to the subject of horror films, I try to keep my midnight movies collection all in one place. And I didn't always do that either, because that includes not just horror films, but also science fiction and some more teenage pop culture films like some of the Beach Party films, okay, which I also had in a separate place at one time. Right now, I'm keeping all of the Midnight Movies collection in one place, with the exception of The Pit and the Pendulum, which I consider to be a Barbara Steele film, so I put that in her section. So that's how crazy it gets. The other actors that I put in their own section, Elvis Presley. I have all of Elvis Presley's theatrical films and several of his concert films and some documentary compilations, including some early TV performances like the ones they did on the Ed Sullivan Show, things like that. So I keep those all in one place. I have a nice big shelf of Elvis Presley. And Betty Davis, one of my favorite actresses. I have a growing collection of hers. That's one of my goals as a collector. I know that sounds crazy to some people who don't care about Betty Davis, but I really want to have as many of her films as I can get. So she has a nice long couple of shelves of her own, and I even include the VHS films that I have of her stuff, which I do not have yet on DVD, which may not be available on DVD, and I will keep those together with the DVDs until I can replace them with DVDs. And going back to Barbara Steele, I also have a lot of her films on VHS. Some of her more obscure Italian and French films and early English films are not yet available on DVD. So eventually I will replace those as well. The director that I have is Woody Allen. I have a huge collection of Woody Allen films, and I keep those all together. I also put in that section the films that Woody Allen stars in, the ones that I have anyway, that he just stars in and did not direct, so I include those. And also the category of film noir. I have two huge sections, and more to put into those sections, which I don't have room for right now, of film noir. I have something like 5 or 6 box sets of film noir collections, and I mix those in with the 20th Century Fox film noir collection, which I have a complete collection of. I think there are 23 or 25 of those, and then all kinds of miscellaneous things, the classics from the 40s like Double Indemnity and Detour, and on up to the present day, things that are considered to be film noir. So I have those all together too. I just like to keep those in one place. What I'm thinking about doing eventually, and this gets kind of crazy, but I consider the classic era of films to be starting from the 1920s and through the decade of the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. Somehow for me, at the end of the 1960s, I consider that to be the end of the classic era of films. From the 70s on, I think of those as modern films. And I would eventually like to take all of my classic films that are not horror films and not Betty Davis and not, musicals, things like that. Oh, I also have my collection of musicals. I keep those in one place as well. Okay. So I would like to put all of my classic Hollywood films in one section according to decades. Start with the silent films, and then 30s and 40s, because I really, to me, that's, I don't know, those are just really precious to me, and they should be celebrated in their own section. I don't know. This is how I feel about this stuff. I remember when I first started collecting movies back in the 80s and 90s, VHS, long before I got into the DVD thing. I didn't have that many for a long time, and I only had a couple of shelves, a couple of shelving systems, and I could keep everything. I used to take the cover art and place it so I could see it. The art was, they're like photographs on a wall, and the art is so cool on the DVD covers that I wish I could do that. I wish I could see the covers to the DVDs, the covers to the movies every time I walk in the room. So I when the collections get so big, of course, you just have to put everything, stacked next to each other, and you can just see the title of the film. So I feel like that's kind of, you're missing out on one of the joys of collecting, is to see that art every time you go into the room. And I'm thinking about, if I get everything organized the way I want, I might have kind of a a shelf where I have a revolving display of DVD or VHS cover art that I might just display for a while according to category, according to actors that I like, or maybe just things that I've purchased recently, right? And just keep them up there just for my own visual interest. and just have them there for a time so I can enjoy the art. And that's how insane all this stuff gets. But I don't know. I think some of you might really understand what I'm talking about. Right now I'm trying to get my TV room, my DVD room organized. It's been a mess for a long time, which is why I never film up there, because it's just so embarrassing that I don't really want anybody to see it right now. But I bought another shelving system from Best Buy, and I figure if I could just get a few more and get them in place, and then put up all the posters and the photographs that I've had stacked up against the wall for a long time, get everything framed and get everything in place, and then I can take you guys on a tour of my room, and yeah, that's what I want to do. So anyway, great topic, and so hope everybody had a great holiday. And as always, comments are welcome. Okay, you can tell me I'm crazy, because I probably am. See ya.